I was Elias, 30 years old, a software engineer with a quiet life in Portland, Oregon. I loved my work, found joy in simple pleasures, and believed in building things that lasted. That included my relationship with Sarah, my fiance. She was a whirlwind, beautiful, a freelance graphic designer with a vibrant personality that always drew attention. We were getting married in a few months, and I pictured our future like a perfectly coded program: stable, efficient, and endlessly rewarding. Our home, a small craftsman in the suburbs, was our sanctuary, a place where we planned our lives and dreamt of a family. I loved her with every fiber of my being, even the parts that were a little too impulsive, a little too focused on the shiny things in life. I thought she balanced me out, brought a spark to my steadiness. The wedding was meticulously planned. We had chosen custom-made wedding rings, symbols of our unique bond and the lifelong commitment we were about to make. They weren't just metal, they were promises, hopes, and shared dreams. Sarah seemed just as excited, but as the days turned into weeks, a subtle shift began. Late nights at work, vague excuses for her absence, a coldness in her touch. My gut screamed, but my heart wanted to believe. Then came the gut-wrenching discovery: Sarah was having an affair. It wasn't just a fleeting mistake. It was with Mark, a wealthy, older car collector, whose ostentatious mansion and prized vintage vehicles were the talk of her social circles. Mark was everything I wasn't: flashy, boisterous, obsessed with material possessions. The real dagger to my soul came days later when I realized our wedding rings, the very symbols of our love and future, were gone. I confronted her, and she confessed, not with remorse but with a chilling nonchalance. She had sold them. Sold our rings, to fund her lavish escapades with Mark, to keep up appearances in his world. My world didn't just shake, it shattered into a million irreparable pieces. I tried to confront Sarah, to make her understand the depth of her betrayal, not just the cheating, but the absolute disrespect in selling our rings. She simply scoffed, her eyes cold. "You were boring, Ilias, predictable. Mark offers excitement, a life you could never give me." She dismissed the rings as just metal you can buy more, as if our love could be replaced by a trip to the jewelry store. I felt a cold knot twist in my stomach. I tried to recover the money from the rings, contacting the jeweler, explaining the situation, but the trail was cold. Sarah had spent it all, vanished into the ether of Mark's extravagant lifestyle. I felt utterly humiliated, powerless. I consulted a lawyer, desperate to understand my rights, to find a way to reclaim something from the wreckage. But the legal battle for a broken engagement and shared assets, especially the intangible value of our rings, would be long, messy, and financially draining. Every attempt to gain control, to find justice, ended in a dead end, leaving me feeling even more exposed and defeated. I hit rock bottom. Sleep became a luxury I couldn't afford, my appetite vanished, and my focus at work blurred into nothingness. I saw Sarah flaunting her new life with Mark, sometimes catching glimpses of her laughing in the passenger seat of one of his gleaming vintage cars, each one a testament to his wealth and her new status. Friends, well-meaning but gossipy, would relay tales of Sarah's newfound happiness, her extravagant trips, her endless shopping sprees. I felt like a foolish, broken joke. The car collection, which Mark constantly boasted about and Sarah admired so openly, became a glaring symbol of my suffering, a monument to her betrayal and Mark's arrogant disregard for my pain. I hated those cars. I hated what they represented. It was in the darkest hours, staring at the ceiling of our empty house, that a cold, precise idea began to form. Sarah had traded our future for a flashier present, sold our commitment for a material gain. What if I could take away the source of that material gain, not just from Mark, but from Sarah's perceived happiness with him? I remembered overhearing Sarah once telling a friend how much Mark absolutely adored his cars, how he often said they were his entire identity, that he'd be lost without them. I knew Mark was a collector, and collectors often leveraged their assets, taking out loans against valuable pieces to fund new acquisitions or other investments. I had a background in data analysis, a meticulous eye for detail. I started digging. It was a long shot, but I was desperate for something, anything. I found a public record, a series of loans Mark had taken out, complex financial arrangements often used by wealthy individuals. One particular loan caught my eye, linked to a specific, incredibly rare Bugatti in his collection. The paperwork was a mess, full of complicated clauses and fine print. It took weeks of painstaking research, cross-referencing documents, and quietly consulting a distant acquaintance who specialized in complex asset law, but I found it. A subtle flaw, a missed payment on a specific technicality that Mark, in his arrogance, had likely overlooked. It was a breach, minor on the surface, but with devastating consequences according to the complex legal framework of the loan. The original lender, a small, aggressive private equity firm, had been looking for a reason to call in a substantial amount. I made an anonymous tip, providing them with the exact details of the breach, citing my concern as a local resident who knew the car was being improperly maintained, a lie, but a plausible one. The dominoes began to fall. The firm, seizing the opportunity, initiated foreclosure proceedings on that specific Bugatti. But because of how Mark had structured his loans, intertwining several vehicles as collateral, the seizure of one car triggered a cascade, putting a significant portion of his prized collection at risk. My revenge was taking shape, not through direct physical harm, but through a calculated, devastating blow to his financial empire, and by extension, Sarah's new gilded cage. The auction was set. I used all my technical skills, creating a carefully anonymized online presence, a shell company acting as the intermediary to list the seized vehicles. It was a nerve-wracking process, every click, every phone call a risk. I had to ensure everything was legally ironclad, that no trace led back to me. The day of the auction arrived, a crisp autumn morning. I sat at my computer, a knot of anxiety and grim satisfaction tightening in my chest. Then, my phone rang, an unknown number. It was Sarah. Her voice, usually so confident, was shrill with rage and desperation. "What did you do, Elias? What the hell did you do? Mark's cars are being auctioned off. You psycho, he's going to sue you into oblivion." I didn't say a word, just listened to her frantic accusations and threats, her words dripping with fear for her new, luxurious life. Then Mark got on the line, his voice booming but with an underlying tremor of panic. He threatened legal action, vowing to ruin me. But I had been careful. The auction was legitimate, orchestrated by the aggressive private equity firm that I had subtly tipped off. The loopholes Mark had created with his convoluted loans were now closing in on him. One by one, the cars went under the hammer. Each bid, each sold item, felt like a nail being hammered into the coffin of Sarah's new life with Mark. The Bugatti, the centerpiece of his collection, sold for a staggering sum. The entire auction was a massive success, the proceeds satisfying Mark's various creditors, but leaving him financially crippled and publicly humiliated. I didn't get any of the money directly, but I didn't need to. The knowledge was enough. The poetic justice was clear. Sarah's choice to abandon genuine love for superficial wealth had led to the very source of that superficiality being stripped away from her new partner. Mark, due to his own financial carelessness and arrogant belief in his untouchability, had lost his most cherished possessions and a significant portion of his fortune. Sarah, who had sold our rings for her immediate gratification, now watched as her entire perceived future with Mark crumbled. I made an anonymous donation to a local charity that supports victims of financial abuse in relationships, a significant sum to help others caught in similar webs, ensuring the money, in a strange, indirect way, did some good in the world, unlike the rings. The aftermath was a slow, quiet healing process. The anger eventually faded, replaced by a profound sense of closure and an unexpected peace. I focused on my career, on rediscovering the simple joys I had once shared with Sarah, but now found within myself. I learned to trust my instincts again, to value authenticity over flash. My new normal was one of resilience, self-respect, and a quiet strength I hadn't known I possessed. Months later, the grapevine in Portland's social circles was buzzing. Sarah and Mark's relationship, built on a foundation of deceit and materialism, had imploded spectacularly after the car auction. Mark's finances were, as I suspected, far shakier than he let on, and the loss of his collection had exposed him as less of a titan and more of a house of cards. Sarah, disillusioned by her diminished prize, abandoned him, unable to tolerate a lifestyle that was no longer quite as lavish. I heard she was struggling, bouncing between temporary living situations, trying to maintain the illusion of wealth without the actual means. The rings she had so carelessly sold, just metal in her eyes, were never recovered, leaving her with a tangible loss she couldn't replace. I saw a recent photo of her online, her once vibrant smile now brittle, her eyes holding a deep, unsettling regret. It was a stark contrast to my own calm, content existence. She lost everything she thought she wanted, while I, though hurt, had rebuilt my life on a foundation of honesty and self-worth. It turned out, some treasures couldn't be sold, and some debts were paid in far more valuable ways than money.